Todd Bruder in studio, and we're pleased to be joined on the Southwest Air and Heat Hotline by State Auditor and Inspector Cindy Byrd. Good morning.
Good morning, Todd. It's great to be on this morning with you.
Well, yeah, we're excited to talk with you. First of all, thank you for all the good work you're doing for the state. What I love about you, it doesn't matter what party somebody is affiliated with. Boy, when you see an entity in the state that is, doing funny stuff with the funds, you are right there to set them straight.
Well, that's what the voters elected me to do, and I've taken that job seriously. And at the end of the day, we all want Oklahoma to prosper and be best, and we can't do that unless we're taking care of the money.
Well, that is certainly true. Now, if I remember, you were elected to the state auditor position in 2018, but you actually worked in that office a little bit before, didn't you?
I did. So as of January of next year, I will have been a government auditor for 30 years, auditing all levels of government from the state to county government to city government and even to your school district. So there's a lot of government to audit in Oklahoma, and I know all the levels and all the laws.
And I guess you come from, your background is a CPA, correct?
That is correct. I am a CPA, have an accounting degree, and have served the state in that capacity.
That's excellent. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up and all of that?
Well, I live in a small town of Colgate in southeastern Oklahoma. I still live there with my husband and my family. It's a small town of about 2,000, and I tell everybody it's where everybody knows their business and yours. But I love it. It's the small towns in Oklahoma that, make us unique, that really showcase our values. I grew up here, went to college at East Central University in Ada. They have a wonderful accounting department. And after I graduated, of course, I got my CPA license and was ready to go to work.
And once again, so you've been, doing audits and things like that for about 30 years, and now you're interested in taking it to another level by basically being, I guess, kind of the chief financial officer, if you will, of the state in the state treasurer. What made you decide to run for this post?
Well, after 30 years of seeing the waste, fraud, and abuse in government, I'm ready to sit on the other side of the table where I can stop these things from happening before it becomes a headline in the newspaper. It's going to be a different perspective of looking at state government, whereas before I was always on the back end of things, auditing, looking to see if funds had been misused. Now I want to be your state treasurer, where I can safeguard these funds, have a seat at the table where we can direct the funds where they're needed the most in Oklahoma, steward them, make sure we're getting the greatest rate of return, and also in that capacity protect our families who are relying on the pension systems in Oklahoma.
What do you think the number one role is of the treasurer? Is it protecting those state funds, I guess?
The number one role of the treasurer is to invest the funds that are held in the office of treasurer, as well as making sure the processes are handled properly. The treasurer works with a lot of state agencies to make sure that the funds are put in the right place, that they're spent. OMES handles the expenditure side of things, but the treasurer's office is very important in the processing of those funds.
And as you touched on, so many different dollars coming from so many different places. You have the appropriated funds. You have some agencies that actually get revenue from what they do. And then, of course, a lot of agencies depend on federal money. But that's always kind of scary, too, because you never know if that federal money is going to be there every year, right?
That's right. Did you know that in the last 4 to 5 years, Oklahoma has spent an additional $7 billion, that's billion with a B, an additional $7 billion in federal expenditures each year. And one of the things I ask people whenever I'm speaking to them, do you feel like our state is better off for having spent an additional $7 billion each year in federal funds? And what are we going to do as we go forward and those funds are drying up? That's a big concern in this state.
It is, and every time there are federal funds, there are always strings attached. And, one of the ones that comes to mind, obviously, voters voted for Medicaid expansion. And already, from what I understand, that's costing us more as a state than we anticipated. And you never know if the federal government is going to drop down the amount that they're paying. And, of course, there's a couple of state questions that are going to be on the ballot that people have a chance to maybe change how that's done in our state. Any thoughts on that?
Well, whenever the state of Oklahoma voted to expand Medicaid back in 2020, at the time the federal government was promising to pay 90%, with the state paying 10%. And now as we see a $39 trillion debt at the national level and folks in D.C. saying, hey, we can't afford to keep paying these bills, we're going to have to put some of this back on the state, that 10% could become 15% or 20%. And if that happens, it would not take long for the state of Oklahoma to use up its, over $4 billion savings accounts that we have with no way forward in the future. So some hard decisions are going to have to be made about how we fund Medicaid expansion and how we go forward. It is probably the biggest concern at the state capitol right now, I believe.
I can believe that without a doubt. And you mentioned the rainy day fund. It seems every year in the legislature, we have some people say, hey, instead of having a flat budget, let's dip into the rainy day fund. But I know you're like me. You can remember it wasn't too long ago when we didn't have any savings.
That's right. I believe whenever Governor Stitt came in, there may have been $800,000. But even under Governor Fallin, the revenue downturns were so great that most of that was used up. So it is very wise to have a savings account, so to speak, to make sure that we can cover what we need to in Oklahoma as the budgets are crafted. That right now stands at the combined funds stand at a little over $4 billion. And anyone can argue maybe that's too much, maybe it's not enough. But at the end of the day, I think we all want a little bit of cushion to make sure that we're still delivering services as a state that we promised to our constituents.
We're talking with Cindy Byrd, state auditor and inspector. She is now a candidate for state treasurer. And I would imagine as the state treasurer, you would oversee all the investments regarding that rainy day fund. Is that correct?
That's correct. The last few years, interest rates have been higher. We've had a huge savings account. It's been a great time to promote the investment track record. We're not always going to be in that position going forward. So that is a big concern and one that I would take very seriously and make a priority. Also, one of the things that's just recently been put in the treasurer's office is the Taxpayer Endowment Trust Fund that was newly created and funded with $200 million this year. That is part of the Invest in Oklahoma initiative. And, I tell this story, and I've been talking about this now for 15 months. Whenever I was in college, I worked at the Wrangler Jeans factory. And at that time, in my little town of 2000, whenever it was closed, it employed 330 employees. But whenever President Clinton signed NAFTA, those jobs went out of country. And so it's always been very important to me to see how federal policies can affect your Main Street and how it can dry up industry. So with this new Invest in Oklahoma initiative that's just been put in under Governor Stitt and this funding of the Taxpayer Endowment Trust Fund that's part of that initiative, that is going to be so transformative to help our Oklahoma companies. And part of my message has been to invest back into our homegrown companies, those that share our Oklahoma values and have stayed with us through economic downturns. This new Taxpayer Endowment Trust Fund will help give capital to some of those companies who want to go through the process to get help. And it could be transformational for our state. It could bring back jobs organically the right way and help us grow our base without raising taxes.
Yeah, nice to invest in local Oklahoma companies instead of foreign entities and things like that. You know, one of the things that the current treasurer's, I guess, taken a little bit of heat on, even the legislature too, over the last couple of years, we've tried to divest ourselves out of investing in companies that hate oil and gas, that, you know, ESG and all of that. And then we had, of course, the Supreme Court rule against us as far as pensions being able to make those decisions. Any thoughts on that whole controversy?
Yes, I have a lot of thoughts on that, Todd. First of all, I am part of the State Financial Officers Foundation, and I too have taken the national stands to push back against ESG investing. I think that it was the implementation that could have been better in the Treasurer's office. And instead, because it wasn't executed properly, the law also was poorly drafted. This is an opportunity for someone like myself with my experience to make sure that law is sound and that we are investing for the greatest rate of return. You know, money is green. It is not red or blue. And whenever it comes to investments, at the end of the day, we want the greatest rate of return. And that is a priority of mine as your next state treasurer.
What are your thoughts on, like, there's so much buzz around cryptocurrency and things like that. I mean, it wouldn't be wise to invest state funds in that, would it? Or would it?
Well, you know, there is an argument on both sides of that. I think that, I mean, we're eventually going to be headed in that direction, but we want to make sure that our state maintains its sovereignty. We do not want federal policies pushed down on us before we're ready to look at them and see about implementing them for ourselves. The digital currency is going to happen, but we need to make sure that we're doing this in a manner that is safe and it protects our taxpayer investments.
You know, one of the other funds that's gotten a lot of attention, especially over this last legislative session, is the Tobacco Settlement Endowment Fund. Obviously, we can only spend the interest on that, but we've been using it primarily for running television and radio ads that say, drink more water and eat more vegetables. And the legislature has tried to come up with some different ideas to maybe use that money better. Does the Treasurer's Office oversee that account, or is that all that independent TSET board?
The treasurer serves as the chair of the investment board. So it's very important to make sure that we are investing those funds wisely. Now, back to your point about how that money should be used, I do have an appointee to the TSET board. There are two boards. There's the TSET board and then there's the TSET investment board. So on the TSET board, I think it's important that that board is utilizing those funds to really help Oklahomans. And as we go forward, our rural hospitals are in trouble financially. And as someone who lives in a rural area, you know, as are you out there in Weatherford, we want to make sure that we have the health care that we need, the health services that we need to live in rural Oklahoma. TSET has been a big priority, or has been a big foundation for providing some of those health services. And we just need to make sure that that's where it continues to be, as well as funding, you know, some of the bigger projects with OU and OSU that are providing healthcare services across this state. We need to make sure that TSET is staying true to its intention, to its original intention of providing healthcare services.
You know, one question that I've always had, and I don't want to sound like I'm greedy, but we talk about the problems with rural hospitals and healthcare in general. You know, we saw the hospital in Clinton close down for over a year, and now they're up and they're running again, getting some federal funds to help with that. But why can we only spend the interest on the TSET fund? I mean, you would think at some point with something like healthcare, could we not tap into the actual fund itself to help with rural health care and other things?
Whenever the TSET fund was created, it was placed into our Constitution. So any changes about how those funds are distributed would have to go back to a vote of the people to change that. The way it currently sets, the corpus can't be touched.
Do you think there would be an appetite eventually to do that, to take it back to the people, or is that a no-go at this point?
Well, I mean, our legislators have talked about that this session. And I don't know where that stands. I don't know if that's going to, be passed before session ends, but I think that's definitely on the table with some legislators that needs to be done. I believe that's going to be up to the people on how they decide to continue to maintain that trust fund going forward.
We're talking with State Auditor and Inspector Cindy Byrd. She is running for state treasurer. Of course, the primary is coming up next month. In the little bit of time that we have left, what are some other things that you would like to accomplish if you're elected as state treasurer?
Well, I think that the office needs some modernization. Not just the state treasurer's office, but many of our larger state agencies have not had the software systems they need to truly function. And there's been a big push under Governor Stitt to get those changed. I think there's still more work to do. I think that would be a big, important part of it. Also, another issue that is facing our state, as the auditor, I'm tasked with auditing the state's financial statements as well as the state treasurer's financial statements. In the last few years, that has become a real concern. The state of Oklahoma has not been able to give us a set of financial statements to audit and get that audit finished, and neither has the state treasurer. This is why that's important. Our bond rating centers on partly on the financial statement audit and the opinion that is issued on the accuracy of those statements. That financial statement is proving to bond rating agencies our solvency, how we manage our funds. And if we do not have that on hand, they can lower our bond rating. The state of Oklahoma has not taken this seriously, and I think the state treasurer plays a big role in making sure that those statements are done properly and that they get out so that the treasurer can continue to make sure our bond rating is correctly. Our bond rating doesn't have anything to do with relationships or wining and dining people. It's the cold, hard facts. Are we financially solvent? What is our liquidity? Are we handling our money properly? And that all comes from an audited set of financial statements. That's how we prove those things. And that's something that I would make sure is a priority each year, that it's timely done, because as we have bond issues at the state level, or even if our cities and counties have bond issues for capital improvements, they're counting on that. That's the rate of interest that they have to, that's what determines the rate of interest that they have to pay. And I don't think our state's taking that seriously enough.
Are there not state laws that require us to get these audits done, these financial statements out in a timely fashion, or is that just kind of a gray area?
Well, it's a little bit of a gray area, and it's not about the audits. It's about the state providing the financial statements to be audited. Once we have a set of financial statements, especially from the state of Oklahoma or the state treasurer's office, we are clearing the deck, making sure that all hands are on that, making sure we have a timely report put out. But we can't, because of auditing standards, we can't prepare the financial statements. That comes from the state of Oklahoma and the treasurer's office to get their financial statements prepared and to us so that we can provide those audits.
Well, when you look at being treasurer of the state of Oklahoma, as we mentioned at the top of the interview, there is a lot of money out at stake, and we have to make sure that it's going to the right places and that it isn't being skimmed, and because there's always fraud when it comes to government money, whether at the state level or the federal level, right? There just is.
Right. And I think that that's something that I've been reporting on. One of the things that I'm very pleased to report that has happened this year, Representative Judd Strom contacted me last year and asked, he said, all these audits that you're putting out, he said, what laws can be put in place to prevent these things from happening? And so some of my key team members and myself sat down and proposed several things, and I think it resulted in 8 bills. And Representative Strom he started talking about this, and many legislators. It was a bicameral effort to make sure that this got passed, and I believe all 8 bills did pass, and it's going to bring accountability and transparency and prevent some of these things from happening. Just last week, I released the City of Hera audit, and then I also have another audit coming out soon. If these laws had been in place, those issues would have been prevented. It would have brought more accountability and transparency to have safeguarded the funds before these issues happened. And that's what we want. We don't want constant scandals in the newspaper. We want taxpayers' funds stewarded properly. We want accountability and transparency. We want the services delivered that the state of Oklahoma is supposed to deliver without fraud, waste, and abuse. And that's the goal.
Our guest this morning is Cindy Byrd, state auditor and inspector running for state treasurer. The primary coming up next month on June 16th. So bottom line it for our listeners. So why do you feel you are the best candidate?
I think my track record speaks for itself. I have stood against fraud, waste, and abuse. I'm a CPA. There is no level of government that I haven't been responsible for auditing and trying to clean up. And I believe that those things combined, along with smart investments, is what the state treasurer's office needs. And also, this is one point that we haven't talked about, it's the contracting. A couple of years ago, I had an audit come out, and I had the headline, "Our state is becoming a no-bid state." I think the treasurer's office needs to clean up their contracting processes, make sure that all contracts are bid. You know, even in the state auditor's office, things that aren't necessarily required to be bid, we bid them because we know that that is safeguarding and stewarding taxpayers' money the way a taxpayer would. A taxpayer is going to make sure they get the best product for the best price, and that's the way state government should be spending every dollar. That's something else that I would bring to the state treasurer's office, and I believe that that is what the taxpayers want to see.
Very good points there. Well, Auditor Byrd, thank you so much for your time this morning. Good luck as the primary coming up on June 16th.
Thank you, Todd. I do want to tell everyone, if you want to go out and read more about me, you can go to cindybyrd.com. That's CINDYBYRD.com. And please just remember that Byrd's the word for state treasurer in 2026.
Excellent. Cindy Byrd, state auditor and inspector, a candidate for state treasurer.